What are we at today? Yep, wrong cam, as always. We're live at 7:23. Hopefully you guys are doing well. It's the end of the weekend, unfortunately, and the end of a long week for us. We had a vacation, so it was kind of cool. Lisa was off school, which is always awesome, and the boys, so we got to do some fun stuff. It was very cool. But today we want to talk about intercooling, and the question for today is, and this will be our poll, is intercooling necessary on a low boost application? We're going to add two of them in there. Is an intercooler necessary or beneficial at just 5.5 psi of boost? And we'll start our poll. So the question is, and the reason that this comes up is I ran an intercooler on the 5.3 liter when we ran the M90 supercharger on there. Everybody knows. Again, I got nothing but comments from all the Eaton experts. Oh, that's a heat, and all those do is just heat the air. Especially after we told them how fast we were spinning it. We're spinning at 20,000 RPM. Oh man, that's got to be terrible. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know how long it would live like that. It would make passes, and we made a lot of passes at that RPM level. But, and it just had stock bearings in it. It was just a wrecking yard, the rotor pack and the housing. None of that stuff changed other than the porting that we did to it. And when I say we, I mostly mean the guys from Jokers, because that's the test that I was doing. So they did a ported version. I sent them that housing, and we did some initial stuff. And by we, again, less me than I just did some hand porting. But the guys from AccuFab actually put it in the Haas and took a ball mill and opened it up. And Jason from JT Fab welded the 3.5-inch inlet in it. And we tried that, and it seemed to help a little bit. We didn't do anything to the discharge, and we didn't do anything farther in where the entry to the rotor pack is. It's kind of important. So let me know in the comments too. I was looking at a photo of the discharge side, because I had done some porting. We called it S porting back in the day. And I had done some porting on these blowers, and anything, the first little bit of porting that you do usually gets big gains. It's like head porting too. If you go in and you do a little bit of bowl work, or like on the 706 heads or even the 799 heads, if you unshroud the chamber, oh, look, I found 15 or 20 horsepower, whatever. You can find big chunks. Then it gets harder and harder to find. And I have to imagine that the M90 porting would be the same kind of thing. So we found some airflow gains, and anything you could do to get more air into the blower, it's going to process more air. It's going to make more power. We normally see that as an increase in boost if you increase the inlet side. But one of the things I was looking at was the discharge side. And we have the little silencer ports on either side of the V-shaped discharge. So a couple of guys had asked about what happens if we fill those. And I've been told, and I don't know this from actual testing experience, but we're told by the guys from Magnuson and the guys from Eaton that those are done for noise. So I'm wondering if that allows air to bleed out. And then I got to thinking about it. Well, if air bleeds out there, it's going to bleed out into the area where all the other air goes into, unless it's bleeding out at an inopportune time and is changing the port timing somehow to make the blower less efficient. So my question is, if we fill those in, do we improve the flow rate or potential of the blower? Can we make more power? Are we making more? Like, I'm not too interested in making more pressure, because that's a bad thing. In fact, that's what the video that I'm putting up, I'm almost done editing it on the test that we did on the M90, where we made lots of power with it on the ported M90, the guys at Jokers. And we have an intercooler on it from the guys at Tick Performance. And that leads me to this question. So if we're running a blower and we've got a really efficient NA motor, like we did on the 5.3 with the Brian Tooley LS3, the stage 4 LS3 camshaft, which allows us to make power at a fairly high engine speed. We had the high ram on there because that's what the blower adapted to with the adapter plate from the guys from Tom Demuse over at Demuse Engineering. And then we had the M90, and we were spinning it fairly fast. So we had the trick flow heads on it. So we had the guys from Brian Tooley Racing ported. So we had lots of good stuff. We had a really high power or an NA motor that had lots of NA power output and lots of potential. And the benefit to that is, and this is something I covered in the video, is that we lower the boost. So when you make the motor bigger or more efficient and you're spinning the blower a certain speed and it's discharging air into it on an unmodified motor or on a less powerful motor, the pressure will be high. It's just resistance, basically. It's just back pressure. And unfortunately for us, it's resistance to flow. And so when we decrease the boost pressure by keeping the blower pulley this or the blower speed the same, if we decrease the boost pressure by making the NA motor more efficient, a couple of good things happen. One, we flow more air. The blower is able to process more air. So we would see that if we had an air hat on it, we could see that it flowed more air and it made more power. It always does that. The other thing is instead of running, if we're running like we did on that motor going through the intercooler, and that's our intercooler question in just a second. I'm getting there. Don't worry. If we improve the NA power output and lower the boost, we also lower the charge temperature, because despite the fact that we're running 20,000 RPM blower speed, the air discharging from the blower is not dramatically hot. It's not quite as good as it would be probably at 10,000 RPM and making the same pressure. But really the pressure is the big thing. That's what determines the big temperature rise. And so we don't have a lot. We saw like 85-degree charge air. So it's not very hot. And so that begs the question, if we're only running that low boost, even though we're doing it on a fairly accelerated, RPM range and a very powerful NA motor, and we have this TIC performance air to water intercooler, which is good enough for, 4-digit power levels, in that case, do we need an intercooler on there? Is it beneficial? We know it's beneficial. I mean, that should be a fairly easy question. We know it lowered the charge temperature, but do you need, on, let's say, this application or other applications for you guys out in the street, if you're only running 5.5 pounds on something, on a turbo or a roots blower or a twin screw blower or a centrifugal blower or whatever, do you think you need an intercooler? Let me know in the comments. Do you guys think, would you run an intercooler on something that had 5.5 pounds? I can tell you that And are you, the question you should have is, well, are we blowing it through a carburetor? Because then maybe the answer is no. And then what if you have E85? Do you and 5.5 pounds? Do you need that? I mean, is the air temperature going into the combustion chamber already fairly cool? Because even if you've introduced the fuel down at the port, did it get some cooling, right before it happened? Was there enough time for that to actually take place? Let me know. Let me know what you guys think, because we know that I can tell you from past experience, I ran my Vortec supercharged Mustang all over the place every day for years and years and years with no intercooler. We tried at one time to put an intercooler on. It seemed restrictive and it lowered the boost, so we took it off. But and I was running like 7 pounds or something with the way that it was pulleyed on my motor, because my motor had a slightly lower compression, so more volume in there. Better heads. It had trick flow KPI high port heads on it, and then it had that 224, 232 camshaft in it, and then it had some kind of, it had GT40s and various Cobras and modified Cobras and different kinds of intake manifolds. So it was not a stock motor. It was better than stock. And so the Vortec making 7 pounds probably was pulleyed to maybe make, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that on a completely stock motor. Because I'm sure I had to be making 100 more than a factory, like, the HO upper and lower intake manifold and throttle body and mass air and all that stuff. And and certainly the heads and the camshaft. So I ran around with no intercooler at 7 pounds for years and years and years. Even ran it in the Silver State, sustained wide open throttle for 32 minutes at wide open throttle, as measured by the data logging. The charge temperature was 135 degrees. We know because we data logged it during the run, and it stayed consistent. I did have a cold air. It was a fairly cool day when we took off for the run because it was in the morning and it was up at altitude, and it was probably in September anyway. So, you know, we were not too far away maybe from them getting snow up in that region. So it was cool. And I didn't run E85 back then. This was way back. I did run a pump gas and race gas mix. So we certainly had enough octane for what we were doing when we ran it like flat out for it. But all the other time I was driving around on 91. And then sometimes 87. And on 87, I just told myself, look, you can't race it around. You can't get on it. So I'm curious to see what the poll is going to be on the, is an intercooler necessary or beneficial at just 5.5 PSI boost? 73% are saying yes. I'm honestly, I'm kind of with the 73% here. I think, and I tell people that intercoolers are a good idea no matter what the boost pressure is. No matter what you're running, no matter if it's a turbo or a blower, whatever you're running, an intercooler is always a good idea and it will always help. Even if you don't make any changes to the air fuel and you don't make any changes to the timing and you don't make any changes to the boost and just go from not having intercooler to having an intercooler. Even if you didn't take advantage of all the other things that you could when you have a colder charge air, what you've done is dramatically widened your like safety tuning window. So at 5.5 pounds, it still will add a fairly good bit of power. I mean, it's going to not be 50%, but even if it's 35 or 40% or whatever. So yeah, it's about 30 or 35%, I think. 5.5 of 14.5. Yeah, 3 times, a little more than that. So 30, let's say 35 or 40%. If you're adding that much power, anytime you add boost, you can easily get yourself into trouble with timing. You can't run full NA timing in it unless you have lots of octane. You might be able to run full NA timing, but I don't know that it would benefit from that. Most of the time when we run boost on stuff, we don't see things respond to all of the timing. Sometimes on some of the positive displacement blower stuff, we run like on big blocks, if the big block wants 36 degrees or something like that. A lot of times we run 29 or 30 under boost. So it's getting close. On most of them though, on the LS stuff, if we're running 29 NA, we're between 20 and 22 or 23, depending on what the boost level is and the octane level is. So the argument or the other 25% or so, now 27%, are thinking that, is it necessary? Is it mandatory? It's not mandatory because lots of guys have driven around like that and gotten away with it. I'm one of them. I've driven around 7 pounds with no intercooler for forever, and for years and years and years, including racing it at top speed events where you're wide open throttle for extended periods of time, and didn't hurt it. A lot of that, honestly, I think just plain luck, because I didn't know, excuse me, didn't know nearly as much as I know now about tuning and about performance, and didn't put the effort into doing. I mean, we had a little BZ meter that we used, and you know, had an FMU on it sometimes, and had 24-pound injectors, and then 36-pound injectors, and then a meter, and just kind of hope that all that was okay, and threw octane at it when we ran the Silver State, and all the things kind of worked out right up until the point where I put an R trim on it and tried to run 10 pounds. And that's when the car went really fast. 190, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 miles an hour, something like that. And it was, and no intercooler. It was on a tear. But it definitely hurt itself. So it was not, again, that was the tuning window. It's like we were right up against the edge of that window into the unhappy place. And it let me know by promptly destroying the motor. But I mean, it torched flamed a hole out the side of the between the block and the head, and knocked pistons out of it, and just all kinds of bad stuff. It was bad. It's going really fast when it did it too. Started blowing coolant and various forms of liquid onto the windshield and stuff. That was not really a good time. But you know, still, an intercooler would have been a really good idea for that. But when we ran it before, like I said, 7 pounds not a problem. So I'm definitely one of those that have done it and understand that when you have conversations with people, they're like, yeah, but I don't want to spend the money on an intercooler, or maybe they can't spend the money on an intercooler, and I'm going to run it like this and see what happens. And then maybe they have good luck, particularly on a blow through application where you're getting intercooling from the charge cooling from the fuel. So if even on just pump gas, you get that. So you can get, that's a benefit right away. But if you're blowing into a long runner fuel injected manifold like I was on the Ford, you don't get much of that because it doesn't happen until the very end down by the head port, and there's very little time. And people don't realize that, they're looking at, but it sprays it in there, still right there. It comes in contact with it and it cools it instantly. I'm like, you need to do calculations on how quick that's actually happening, and then figure out your time scale on what the change in temperature can be and how fast does that change in temperature actually happen. It's much better to happen up at the top of the port rather than at the bottom of the port. But it's an interesting thing, and the TIC intercooler worked flawlessly. Again, we're hardly using it at all with this little M90 blower. I love the fact that, and I was one of these guys that back in the day when I said, I don't know how many times, no, the M90 is way too small. You shouldn't use it on anything except the stock motor. And then with much prodding, people letting me know that I should test it, and I did. And then, hey, look, and I knew when going into it, because having done this kind of testing where you're trying to get the maximum out of things, it takes a lot. I mean, it took a 550 horsepower NA motor to get to 650 with the blower, but we know the blower supports that much airflow. In fact, given the fact that we'll go to questions in just a second, but given the fact that we're at 5.5 pounds thereabouts, and we're making that boost with the M90, does that mean, and we're at 650 horsepower, let's say, does that mean that we could get to 700 if we get that boost all the way down to nothing? If we get it to just process air and not make any pressure, and because the pressure, again, that's back pressure, that's resistance to flow. Can we get that thing to process enough air to make 700 horsepower? I don't think I'm not going to try to do it. I just was wondering what your guys' thought was about that. So let's go back to our questions and see what's going on. Jimmy, Eric, James, Larry, Austin, Efren. What's going on? Rome's. We are live. Good evening. Are you talking turbo or supercharger? Yes, we're talking both of those. Right now, the initial discussion with the intercooler was about the M90, but it doesn't matter. It could be a turbo or a centrifugal blower, because that affects it a lot. What does it affect? Aaron fuel is always worth cooling in one way or another. There I go, disagreeing with everybody. Eric, how did you disagree with everybody? Did you click something up top there? Same thing with headers. Basic long tubes yield a bunch of power. Expensive ones might gain a few numbers, but not much. Ever do any testing on a 7665? I don't think I have. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know what size I'd have to look at what size the 76 millimeter CX Racing turbo is. I don't remember the specs on it. A water injection triggered by an electrical pressure switch, a hob switch, and a brass spray from a 20-liter water bottle in the boot that can turn on over 5 psi. Max boost was 9 on a Holden 308. Okay, that works good. Again, my concern with all of that stuff is always just distribution. GM didn't do it on 3800. Yeah, and they were running 7 pounds or so. Tim, what's going on? Sentry. Beneficial, yes. Necessary, no. And yeah, I was just going to bring up blower kits, which are often run non-intercooled. Hope the answer to the poll is no, because I have one running 7 pounds on 93. Yeah. Would a charger cooler be better if you use an AC evaporator? Anything that you can do to get the transfer medium temperature down. That's why ice water, air to water intercoolers work better than ambient water ones. Anything that you could do. And if you could plumb your AC evaporator like Dodge did on their Demon, I think. You could definitely get colder charge air, but you're also having to drive that pump, so you're losing some of that power. So you have to see what the trade-off is. I think the new Supras have their intercooler inside the intake manifold. 7 pounds on a street truck, no intercooler. Like I said, I ran my Mustang around for 10 years like that. 135 is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. I'm sure that that's in reference to the charge temperature of the sustained running on in the silver state of the Vortec under boost. So we were at 7 pounds and running 100 and, I don't know, 75 miles an hour or something like that, sustained. At what boost number would one have to run? At what point do you sacrifice power? Where do you sacrifice? You don't sacrifice power with an intercooler. And the other thing is, an intercooler, even at low boost, will gain power. Getaway. I ran 7 psi through an air-to-water intercooler, and I'm able to pick up 110 wheel horsepower on 93 octane with my Audi because I was knock limited without an intercooler. Went from 400 to 511. So you then turned up the boost and turned up the timing on it because you had an intercooler. Turbo Ranger, not on a blow through. Most manufacturers install intercoolers and they run low boosts, often, guess not needed on many, but why install one? The early systems didn't use intercoolers. Does it have other functions? What are the average air temps on a Turbo 5.3? At what power level? I mean, what boost level? Alan, my intercooler is filled with oil. Check your turbo. Is your turbo going bad? You see horsepower gain from header heat wrap on an NA engine. I don't know that I've ever tested heat wrap on an NA motor. I would guess no. Eric, what was your beneficial question? At 5 psi, the intake air temperature should only be slightly higher than ambient, so no intercooler is needed. It's going to be 50 to 70 degrees more than ambient. So it could be double ambient. Where does one find new O-rings for intercooler piping flanges? What intercooler are you talking about, Alan? I ran non-intercooled Vortec blower on a 6-liter and my second fuel pump failed. That's what made it let loose. Yeah, not having enough fuel is bad. I'm sure that that's what happened to my motor. Because I'm sure my super 24-pound FMU fueling and probably had what were we using back in the day? 155 pumps or something? Does a thicker intercooler really make a difference? Well, on the intercooler thickness, you run into 2 issues that you need to be concerned with. One, do you get more cooling? And do you get more restriction? Those 2 things normally go hand in hand. And what is the balance between those 2 things? Richard, more on the blown L76 Pontiac G8. They're Australian-built units, and dealer-added blowers are very common. So an L76 was not a supercharged motor, right? It was not a factory supercharged motor. Dealers putting blowers on it is a different thing. Is liquid oxygen a thing? Yes, it is a thing. It's very, very cold, but nobody uses liquid oxygen for intercooling. I was going to try using it in a big tub, but it's pretty volatile. I don't run an intercooler on my rear mount. Okay. My EOQ4 is running a 155 pump inline with the factory in tank. Yeah, almost anymore. Most people would go to a 255, because that's just the other ones aren't any less expensive than a 255. I'm in the middle of building a single turbo LS 5.3 Mustang shooting for 1,000 wheel horsepower. How much boost will that take? Well, your answer to how much boost it will take is a function of what your NA motor is. How much power does your NA motor make? If you know how much power your NA motor makes, we can get a pretty good number on the boost on how much it takes to make 1,000 horsepower. Surface area trumps thickness for intercooling. Yeah. Lots of fins in contact with the coldness and the heatness. The blower has provisions to run fluid through it. I don't. So it has an air to water intercooler. Is that what you're talking about? Magnuson 1900 on a 5.3 that has an intercooler even performs better when ambient temperatures of 50 degrees versus 90 degrees. Only 6 psi. There is a huge difference. Yeah, on a 50-degree ambient day, you have more oxygen molecules going in and then being compressed. So it's denser going in. Would water wetter additive and an air to water intercooler be more beneficial than straight water? I don't think you'd see a power change from it, but a lot of guys like to run something like that. And I've used water wetter before in radiators and in the cooling systems, and I like it. But I don't know if you're going to see a change in transfer rate or enough of a change in transfer rate to see a change in charge temperature. You have to do a fairly structured test, and I think you would be looking for onesies and twosies on that. But my point was, a lot of guys would want to put something in there so that the intercoolers don't corrode. Would the GT45 eBay Turbo be a good choice for a very streetable 3.5, or is it too large? It depends on how much power you're trying to make. If you want something that's responsive and fun on the street on a 3.5 liter motor, unless it's a really powerful one, I think I would step down to a GT35. How bad is 140-degree intake temperature? What is too hot? LSA stock intercooler and heat exchanger. So is it 140 after the intercooler? I would have a couple questions. My first question would be, how high of a boost, what boost level are you running? And then what are you doing? What is your air intake system going into the blower? Are you grabbing ambient air from under in the engine compartment? Because if you are, you shouldn't be. You need to do everything that you can to get cold air going into the blower and then make life easier on your intercooler. The flanges on my V-band clamps have an O-ring also where they meet. They're kind of old now. Yeah, I don't use O-rings on any of the V-bands that we use. Sometimes the V-bands now have like a receiver or they have, flanges and the receiver grooves in the clamps, but they have kind of a male and female side where they go together, and because there's a protrusion of a smaller diameter pipe that comes out and they sticks them together. And then when you just clamp them together and that overhang of that interior pipe basically stops anything from getting out. Our 2013 ZL1 had a stock intercooler for 9 pounds of boost at 14 pounds of boost and used an AFCO dual fan. HX spins faster, more heat. Yep. Wondering about chiller or Freon-based fluids to help keep temperatures down. Yeah, you can try all of that. But again, you have to set up a very complex system, and you have to run an AC compressor. You have to run a pump, which costs power to run to get extra cooling. And then so you're negating some of the power that you would get from the cooling. But it is done. Are EGTs necessary to monitor on a turbo LQ4 used for towing? I would like to have them for me. Before I had even an O2 sensor, lambda meter, I had EGTs and used them on my Mustang and not very effectively because they would get very, very hot. And then they get hot like under some situations like cruising up the Grapevine or the Cajon Pass, like at light throttle, the EGTs would get really high. But at wide open throttle is kind of where we were concerned with. And I was equating an EGT to some kind of air fuel, which is not really accurate because you can also affect EGTs with timing dramatically. Trying to get my cousin's wife to let me have this LH653 that's sitting in my backyard. Those are good motors. Chris, what's going on? JM, what's going on? I'm in the planning stage, so just trying to absorb data so I can decide what to do. I'm worried about a non-blower engine with dealer added blowers. As long as a dealer will warranty it, then you should let them do their thing. If you have the money to get a dealer installed blower. Water wetter work well with my circle track car. Yeah, I used it a lot when I was road racing my Mustang. Boost makes engines go. That's right. What's too hot of an EGT? And I know you don't really want any hotter than 1250 on a diesel. Yeah, I don't know what diesel EGTs are. I don't have a real feel for that. How does the shape of an intercooler affect performance? I don't know. Do you mean triangular or round or whatever? Intercooler performance really is a function of the two things that we talked about, is a function of flow through the core and then versus surface area, thickness. It's flow versus how much temperature drop. And unfortunately, those two things are at odds, because if you want it to flow through there nice and smoothly and not be restrictive, then it doesn't come in contact with a lot of stuff to get cold. So you are going to get some sort of drop, and it is going to be some sort of restriction to flow. But the net benefit is that you have a much lower charge temperature, and hopefully not a lot, and it's not terribly restrictive. There are a lot of good intercoolers that are a really good balance of those two things. There's the video where an NA engine makes 20 horsepower increase from a water-cooled intercooler. Yeah, I'm not buying it. We've seen it done at Bonneville where they had pressurized air feeding it, but it's really hard to get an air-to-water intercooler, and you can't use ambient water because the motors are already drawing in ambient air. So the only way to do that would be to run some sort of intercooler where you could get the air temperature down below ambient. So you'd have to have ice or Freon or something else that you have to get the temperature down lower than ambient to get gains. Dropping the Coyote in, nice. Dropping the Yote. Just got a 4th gen. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Roman, I just got a 4th gen Camaro with 228, 243 cam. Ported 243 heads. I don't know how much power, but it's fun and fast. That should be a good combination. I installed an EGT sensor and gauge after boosting my 6.5, and it kept me out of trouble. It is. More information is always better, so the more gauges you have, if you're paying attention to them, it's always good. I don't like driving a boosted motor without having a boost gauge. I like to at least see that. 140 degrees after intercooler, cold air intake, fresh air out front, 12 pounds. Okay, Bob, so one more question. 140 degrees after the intercooler. What is the ambient air temperature? Are oil squirters worth doing the cooling on the piston versus a drop in oil pressure with a stock pump? Well, if your motor did not come with oil squirters and you're adding them, then you wouldn't do that with the stock pump, because you'd have to calculate the extra flow of the squirter passages and then decide you probably would need more pump. Intercooling helps any type of boost, no matter what the pressure is. There you go. V-band has an inner flange that slips into the receiver flange, but also have an O-ring. Older build, probably around 2011. Okay. Tanner, I've got an 11-to-1 346 LS. Precision 118, 106. It's like the man-sized turbo there. 30 pounds on E85. Drag and drive in street classes before getting to race. Going to methanol. What do you recommend? Air to air, air to water, no intercooler. You're running it on methanol. A lot of guys, here's the here's the decision you'll have to make. This is what you'll have to decide. You're running 30 pounds of boost on the 85. Your charge temperatures are going to be hot. They're going to be 300 plus degrees. An intercooler is going to be more effective on something that's running high boost because it has the opportunity to take way more temperature out of it. We know that will work and it will be beneficial for you, especially if you run ice water and air to water, which is what most drag guys would be doing. The question becomes, if you're running methanol and you added ice water and the tank and pumps and all that stuff, how much weight did you add? So now how much slower is the car from the weight? And then how much power did you gain from that weight that you added? And what is the trade-off there? For some guys, M1, they don't want to do that. They don't want to put that on. Even though they know that will lower the charge temperature and make more power, it might not net them very much in terms of ET and mile an hour just because of the weight change. Ford warranties, dealer added blowers on Coyotes. Okay. I'm thinking the engine could really go good in a beater C4 Corvette, twin turbos, Holy Terminator. That would be uncomplicated. And that's very important for getting projects done. A 5.3 and a 4,000 pound truck, 100 pound injectors, sloppy stage 2, 7665, looking for 12 psi max boost. So loose screw. My question is, why are you looking for 12 psi? What is that number? What is that number going to do for you? Because what you should be looking for is a power output. Are you looking for making a certain amount of power, an ET or a mile an hour, or what are you trying to get? I don't understand how people just randomly choose a boost number, because the boost number can mean nothing. It means a multiplier of whatever you have. A 5.3 with a sloppy stage 2. I don't know what intake manifold and stuff you have on there, but that's going to be a mid 400 horsepower NA motor at the flywheel. Just got a Gen 6 454. Best option for boost or treatable 1,000 horsepower. Jonathan, just take a look at the videos that I have. We did 1,000 horsepower stuff with turbos and blowers and stuff. Are intercooler cores between the manifolds beneficial? Yes. The one that we ran from the guys at Tick Performance works very, very well. I like it. I like those manifolds, particularly for the stuff that I'm doing on the engine dyno. I think it helps not having to run all the tubes in the other intercooler that we run. Not looking forward to pulling my engine to check ring gap, but I know in my heart I have to. Just like anyone, a little boost will never be enough. Yeah, if you go out and run 7 pounds, it's probably fine. Might not be. You could go out and run it and it never hurt itself. You could go out and run it and hurt it immediately and then go, yeah, I probably should have checked that. Either way. The motor mounts were similar, but I had to make room literally everywhere else to fit the thing. Yeah, that's sometimes the case. Dennis, we used cool cans back in the 60s and 70s, just copper line wound around inside a large coffee can filled with ice. Not sure how much it helped, but racing in Bradenton, Florida, it was always hot. A lot of guys do that more to stop vapor lock rather than a performance gain. 70-degree ambient normally when I'm driving. And Bob, do you have any temperature readings like coming out of the blower before the intercooler? Is there room to see that? Water is 8 pounds per gallon. Yeah, it gets heavy. And then the tank and the pumps, the lines. So if it's 80 going in, 12 pounds of boost, 40. So it's it'd probably be like 260 going in, I'm thinking. And it's 180 coming out. That intercooler doesn't seem like it's working very well. When it comes to intercoolers, absolutely nothing. That's a pretty bold statement. Nothing comes close to a Cupra nickel intercooler from Whipple. Super expensive, awesome for marine applications. Pity they aren't offered for road vehicles. Okay. Richard, you're a lucky man. I am lucky. If you've seen my wife, you would know that I'm lucky. Looking for 500 wheel horsepower, stock truck intake manifold. Got the 12 PSI number because I don't want to break it. I got the rings. I want to be able to keep it streetable yet have a quick spool turbo. So if this is the loose screw, is this the 5.3? You don't need anywhere near 12 pounds. In fact, you don't need half of that would get you 500 wheel horsepower. A cammed 5.3 and 12 pounds is going to be way over 500 wheel horsepower. Gail Banks is trying to reach you about your air mass increase from the intercooler. Is that to me? Gail knows. I've spoken to Gail a few times. I know him from way back. When you're doing your dyno test with turbos, what EGTs do you see in the higher boost levels? I don't normally run EGTs on the engine dyno on the turbos. What I normally run is an air fuel meter. I remember 25 years ago, if you're getting 300 horsepower out of a 4-cylinder, you're doing really good. Came up with an idea of a sleeved cold pipe going from the turbo to the throttle body with ice water or something to cool the intake tube. Might keep inlet air temperatures down without restricting. Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that the tube will be cool because you have cold water going in it. And the inner tube will be cool, but the air won't be because you don't have enough surface area in contact with the air. The whole surface area of that tube is only transmitting a change in temperature to the very outer boundary layer of that airflow. All the rest of the stuff in the middle is isolated from that. And so it just goes through hot. And the other stuff is like, hey, we're cool out here. And it's like, yeah, I don't got time for that. I'm just going through the middle. And so you're not going to get much cooling, especially at wide open throttle where the airflow is greatest. Like at idle, yeah, maybe more time for the temperature change to happen. But at wide open throttle, I just don't think it's going to cool that much. Without an AFCO heat exchanger, my GT500 would heat soak and pull timing after a short drive in Texas weather. I'll run a 4-pound spring in the wastegate. Yeah, it's loose screw. It's always easy to start. We always start with low boost. And then we just use a little adjuster, or we use a electronic wastegate controller and then go up from there. But it's a lot easier to make sure everything's right on low boost and not hurt anything. And then go, oh, look, we hooked the wastegate up wrong and we hooked that up to the top and it started to sky the boost numbers. How much of an issue is condensing water in the intercooler? There is some. I remember Mahovitz, when he was running his motors, he was running very high boost on the modular Ford stuff, and he was running ice water. And inside the cooler, there was definitely moisture there, and condensation on the outside. Obviously, we normally see that. How difficult is it to get 600 horsepower out of a Vortec-based 383 stroker small block Chevy NA? I have 383 videos up, but you're not going to do it with Vortec heads. So it's not going to be that. It's just going to be a one piece rear main seal 383 with really good heads like Airflow Research or something. You can do it. It's not going to be very drivable though. Todd, I did see the LS3 thing. I don't know about that right now. I don't know if I can do it. I have all of my dyno stuff is booked up right now. And adding a different motor, I don't know if that's going to work. BDS in Whittier, California has AL sandwich blower, great in freshwater boats, not saltwater. Yeah, I posted a photo of a water-cooled housing blower. This one was a Mooningham, I think. The Westech had sitting around. It was an old school one, but they had that. If I'm not too late, Harrop is making a positive displacement supercharger kit for what? They make positive displacement supercharger kits for lots of stuff, right? They're Edelbrock E210 heads. I don't know what heads those are. I don't know what they flow. I don't recognize the name. I'm just not as up on the Edelbrock stuff. Across the Delta from you in Brentwood, was worried about inlet air temperature with ambient temp around 100 degrees. So if I do 4 to 8 pounds of boost, is 150 degrees inlet air safe? Are you not having an intercooler on it? I saw a video where someone's using radiator caps to control boost. So that's their pop off, is they have a 15-pound radiator cap on something. That doesn't seem like a. I mean, it's just a pressure relief, so maybe it does work. Yeah, no, Todd, I would like to. I just don't know that, given what I'm doing, if there's time for that. Because it's not just me. That's machine shop stuff, and yeah, Harrop's making those. How much are those Harrop blower kits? They've got to be like 8 or 10 grand, right? I was going to go no intercooler first, planning on adding it if it's needed. Intercoolers are so inexpensive that again, in the age that we live in now, back in the day, you had to spend $1,500 on an intercooler. Same thing with turbos. And now stuff is so inexpensive that it's just, I don't understand why somebody wouldn't put it on there. Currently is a Vortec 350 block, Edelbrock 210 heads, 276, 284. I'm sure the 276, 284 is the advertised number. That's probably a fairly small cam, 224, 232 kind of thing. Do you know how much the E210 heads, how much they flow? Are brand name intercoolers worth it? I don't know. I've never tested what particular intercooler you're talking about, but there's no such thing as a brand name intercooler in that it encompasses like this level of performance. There's different people that have different intercoolers that perform differently. The big thing is having an intercooler or not having an intercooler, and then the other things are smaller steps. Intercoolers are cheaper. Groceries have gone up. Everything has, yeah. I'm taking block and crank into the machine shop tomorrow to have them looked at. Might just build the LS3 and put that into the truck. Your Trailblazer SS intake manifold will not fit on those LS3 heads. That's a different intake manifold. That one of those is a Cathedral and one of them is Recport. Is an E1841P. That's an Elgin cam, right? I can't remember what sloppy stage designation that is. I'm not that, again, I don't do those that often. I've only ever done one video on the sloppy stuff. And is that a sloppy stage 1, a 1.5, 2, or 3, Larry? Sloppy stage 3. Yeah, I use that cam. In fact, I have one of those for sale. And the It did well. It fit available piston to valve clearance. It's a pretty good sized cam, so it makes decent power. It's definitely biggie cam. 72% saying yes. Is an intercooler necessary or beneficial at just 5.5 psi? Sloppy stage 3. Cooler means denser air charge, right? So I'm thinking yes, it should make more power. What should make more power, Keith? Colder air does, we know that. But how are you obtaining your colder air? Richard, I'm considering switching to a single turbo on my CTS V2. Keeping things cool couldn't be as difficult as it is now with the LSA supercharger. 850, 1,000 horsepower range in Florida. I think life would be a lot easier than rather you. Do you still have the 1.9 liter blower on there? Because it's hard to get up. You have to really do all this silly stuff that I did to the M90. It's got to be a ported blower and stuff. Cali Nate, was it in a car accident or something, Daniel? I bought an M9 high performance camshaft for my GY6 and it has 10 thousandths less lobe lift than my stock cam does. How are you measuring lobe lift? Did you put it on the motor? Or? It is a ported one? Okay. Todd, honestly, if it were me, I would put the LS3 together and I would sell it. And then I would just go get a 5.3 or one of these iron 6.0s, a cheaper one, and put it in there because there's nothing stopping you from making the power that you want. You don't have to have an LS2. You don't have to have aluminum LS2. You don't have to have an LS3. You don't have to have ported heads. You don't have to have any of that to make the power that you want. You just have to put together a good running combination that has a cam and springs and boost, and you'll do what you want to do. Middlebrock says the 210s are 275 to 600. Yeah, you're going to be hard pressed to get to 600 with those heads. You're comparing it to the base circle, okay? Currently at 480 horsepower. Okay. Yeah, getting into the low to mid 500s is still pretty doable and streetable. 600 is not a very streetable 383. You have to have a cylinder head that flows 300 CFM, or it's you don't have to. It's a lot easier if you do. Ever going to compare air to air versus air to water intercoolers? Yeah, that video is already up. It's been up for I don't know, a year and a half or something. If you want to know what combos work, go over Richard's video. I'm sure you'll find a combination you want and you'll have dyno results. I did some 383 specific small block Chevy 383 specific videos. I don't know that I've ever put one together where we tried to get 600. I remember doing that on an LS, but I don't remember trying to do it on a small block Chevy. You could use the adapters that make the TBS intake manifold work with a rectangular port head, but yeah, you don't want to do that, Todd. Just run rec port heads, run a rec port intake manifold, run a turbo. We don't have trouble making lots of power. Of a Gen 353, how can it make 400 to the wheels? You just add a little bit of boost to the stock motor, and it will do that easy. Almost had another 6-liter, but the owner's not getting back to me. I know, I wish I could have. There was 4 of them down there when I did my video. Building a 351 Windsor, but currently have non-roller block. So a pre-94. Just wanting fun and reliability. Would you keep the flat tappet or go retro roller? I really like hydraulic roller stuff. Excuse me. I did a long run today. I like hydraulic roller stuff because it's less problematic. But the thing is, you pay for that. It is more expensive. I do have some. I found some small block forward cams that I had down in my storage, but they're roller cams. So I have a 282 and a 294. Or let's see. They're street rollers though, so fully streetable. 5-liter Ford, Extreme Energy. Extreme! Team Extreme. Blower, hydraulic roller, nitrous, XFI. Okay, we're going to have to go over here now. Cleveland, Windsor. Drag race mechanical rollers. So they're Extreme Energy mechanical roller cams. I have an XR286 and an XR292. One of them is 248, 254 with 614, 621. The other one was 254, 260, 621, 627. I just have the cams. How's your CT90 running? I think I haven't driven it in a little while. Now that it's getting warmer, I will be driving it. But I think I need to do points on it. Where can I get a turbo kit? You got to look online. I don't ever do turbo kits. Make a 4853 into a 63. Todd, I do not recommend doing that. Not for boost. Making 850 now on the LSA charger. I want to do the same, but on a turbo. On the turbo, how much boost are you running to get to 850? Is it 850 on the tire? And racing, you're going to be able to make more power at less boost with the turbo than on the LSA. You have at least 150 horsepower driving that blower, probably more than that. I don't know what RPM you're running it at. Is Gen 453 non-DOD with VVT worth keeping for a boosted 700 wheel horsepower build? Yes, all 5.3s are worth keeping for a 700 horsepower build. You don't need a 6-liter to make that kind of power, but it's a bigger is better. If it's extreme, it's good. That's right. Team Extreme. Did you say you could bore a cast 5.3 to 383 with a stroker crank? Yes, but it's not what I recommend. We have run turbos on 383, 5.3, or 4.8 base motors. You go to 3902 or 3905 on the bore, which is an overbore size for a 5.7. You put a 4-inch crank in it. You put a 6.125 rod in, a custom piston that has valve release. You could do a flat top or a 10cc dish. We put decent heads on it and a camshaft, and then ran boost. And you can easily do 1,000 horsepower at under 15 pounds of boost, because it's easily going to make more than 500 horsepower. But I don't recommend that, because you're making the bore thinner by doing that, and it's not necessary with a turbo. You should just do a 5.3, and you can make all the power that you want. Todd, that's it. That's a good shopping network. Have a completely untouched 351 Windsor bottom end, big turbo 400. Hold the bottom end handle. I don't know. We've gone pretty far into 4-digit stuff with those. 250 cam, is it streetable in a small block? You just have to make the small block really, really big. Could there be a video that looks to find the limit on air-to-air and air-to-water, especially if you can control for only weight? How much of the tuning potential does ice water have over a big air-to-air? Ice water is a huge change over any air-to-air. Dramatic. Because you can get the charge air under ambient. You can't get it to ambient with an air-to-air. You can get it under ambient with ice water and an air-to-water. Did you get your starting issues fixed on the truck? No, they actually have resurfaced. New LS 364 450. Can I run any boost without touching rings? Yes. A while back, you mentioned doing a draw through. I do want to do that. I haven't done it yet, though. Rings were not gapped also. It's an old motor, so I figured everything was loose already. Okay. Sure. we can justify things to ourselves. Yeah, less boost is less heat. And also it's your supercharger racing, your supercharger has parasitic loss associated with driving the supercharger. So your combination is making like another 150 or 200 horsepower. You're just not seeing it like on an engine dyno or in acceleration because it's consumed by the blower. Just to spin the blower costs that much power that the motor is producing, but it's using it to spin the blower. The turbo doesn't have that. So that's right away, that's extra horsepower that you're going to have at the same boost level. And the turbo is going to be more efficient at that boost level, especially at higher boost levels. Make sure you get the original Honda equipment points. They really make a big difference. So can I not get those at the local auto parts store? Do I have to go to a Honda dealer to get those? So you're saying I should go to 700 on my Gen 4 5.3? You can easily make that. On the 5.3 with VVT, how much advance and retard do you get? Wondering about valve clearance with a different cam. If you go up in camshaft, you're not going to be able to swing the cam very much. You're going to have to put limiters on it. And at wide open throttle, most of them only have between 8 and 10 degrees of swing anyways. Where all the swing happens on VVT applications is at part throttle. And that's why they use small cams in them, and they have lots of clearance, and they do it at part throttle, and they swing it a lot. But you won't be able to do that when you put a bigger camshaft in it. 585 lift on stock springs. Yeah, especially like on a 550 lift spring, that's kind of bad. On a 500 lift spring, that's really bad. Daniel, can what things be fixed? Oh. 250 at 6,000 is very toe friendly with stock gears. I think that this was 250 at 50. And so is an intercooler necessary or beneficial at just 5.5 PSI boost? 72% saying yes. We'll end our poll. Coil bind is a real thing. That's very true. Summit has 2cc dome pistons available for the 5.3. Will I run into valve clearance issues with that piston, or can I fly cut it? Larry, if you look really closely at a 2cc dome piston, all of the ones that I've ever seen have valve reliefs in it. So they've solved that problem for you already. Have you ever done an exhaust back pressure test and compared it to the parasitic loss of a supercharger? You're talking about almost zero horsepower change and hundreds of horsepower change. So those are not even in the same ballpark. The losses from back pressure on a turbo. We see that when we know that just from doing the formula. Is it possible for a Pro Charger to make less power at higher boost level from 17 to 20 psi? My car actually is slower in the quarter at 22 psi compared to 17. Well, what else is happening? If you're spinning the blower faster, it will make more power. The things that would stop it from making more power are you not running an intercooler? Are you getting lots of hot air? What I suspect is that you're pulling timing based on pressure. And so have you pulled all the timing out of it at 22 psi versus 17 psi? I just would need to know more information. Well, Eric, I may hit you up when I'm doing this. Nitrous doesn't really cool inlet air temps on turbo or boosted motors. It does add a lot of power, but it's actually not very good at intercooling because you never use enough of it. I have videos up on using nitrous as intercoolers. Todd, I'm happy to help, man. I put clay on the top of pistons and turn the motor over, take the head off and measure the compressed clay. Yeah, as long as you're not using a hydraulic lifter and you're using a solid lifter and you've taken up all the lash in your valve train and all that stuff can work. We are spinning a faster air-to-air intercooler, pulling timing at 13 degrees at 22 PS on E85 462 valve. Something is up. Something is amiss. Something is askew. Maybe the view is askew. And on that note, it is time to go, but I will see you guys all tomorrow. The video that I have on the M90 making 650 plus, a little plus, horsepower will be up tomorrow morning. Thank you guys all, and I will see you all tomorrow.